If you are a human being, storytelling runs within your blood. You have a deep-seated, primal urge within you to make up cute little stories, and that's something that's been lost in the age of mass media. Humans today consume. 200 years ago, if you wanted to hear a piece of music, you had to find someone to play it for you. If you wanted to hear a particular story, you needed someone to tell it. There was a balance between producing and consuming art. This was great for building communities, and it's something that we are starved of in the modern era. But video games are different from TV. They allow for creative participation in a dozen different ways. People make mods, you have fan-made game modes, level editors, games like RPG Maker, designing your flag in Animal Crossing, and it's hard to look at speedrunning and call it anything short of inventive. But one of the most enriching ways to be creative when playing a game is through storytelling. I think a lot of fans of PC games are lost in the sauce a bit when it comes to story and plot within games. A little after the turn of the century, games like BioShock, The Last of Us, and Heavy Rain set the bar for intense, narrative-driven gameplay experiences, and elevated it to something commonly regarded as an art form. And I think that this style of game dominates the discussion for a reason. In 1954's publication of Counterblast, Canadian media scholar Marshall McLuhan wrote that official culture still strives to force the new media to do the work of the old media. Television imitated film. Film originally imitated stage theater, and in the same way, people desperately want video games to be like movies and TV. In the process, we lionize the cinematic style of video games as interactive art, and while I love these games, I think that something is being left out of this discussion. In search of the familiar, we are missing out on what makes this new form of media truly unique. Top-down, linear narrative is good, especially with different branching paths, or in cases where the game mechanics tie in really succinctly to the story that they're trying to tell. But video games can do so much more for storytelling than film and TV. They are interactive, and they allow for emergent narrative. Emergent narrative is when story and plot are driven by the choices, imagination, and interpretation of the human player. Think something like Dwarf Fortress or The Sims. It is closely associated with sandbox games, but not all sandboxes are equal in their ability to produce it, and some less sandboxy games can do a better job. When a campaign map requires you to eliminate the enemy to progress through the campaign, this is a structured narrative. When there's no requirement, but Chairman Sheng Jiang has the nerve to ask for technology in exchange for peace, and then when you give it to him, he demands another fucking tech, all but requiring you to eliminate his faction from the surface of the planet, that is emergent narrative. You've built a goal for yourself within the systems of the game, and it has added meaning to your play experience. I believe that emergent narrative in video games is key to fulfilling a deep psychological, even spiritual need within you, and this can definitely be seen within my favorite genre, PC strategy games. Throughout my favorite era, the 2000s, strategy games each had different strong points when it came to storytelling, and I feel that all of these disparate threads were woven together to create the ultimate masterpiece of emergent narrative in Crusader Kings 3, later down the line. Let's do a quick overview of all the different factors that enhance storytelling in strategy games, and afterwards we can talk about how the games put these together and how they can go above and beyond. The first ingredient to good storytelling is having good characters. You need a main character. Either you, as the controller of the strategy game, are the protagonist, like the king of your nation, or maybe you're telling stories about the units that you control, like your Sims in The Sims, or your hero unit in Warcraft 3. Once you have the protagonist, you need an antagonist, a dastardly villain to act as your foil. This is where games with some sort of diplomacy system really shine. I like Empire Earth and Heroes of Might and Magic. They have a lot of color and flavor, but the enemies are just always trying to kill you. Even a basic system of alliances and war and peace, like in Rome Total War, goes a long way to improve the stories that you can tell. Suddenly, you can have dramatic betrayals, or you can work your way through your conflict and become bros. A strong character benefits a lot from either a connection to personalities that we're familiar with in the real world, say, Gandhi. Alternatively, the game can just give you the lore itself. Alpha Centauri is the gold standard for this. Otherwise, you're relying solely on the player making something up, which can work, but regardless, you do need some sort of character for the player to imprint those ideas onto. I think it's clear that you cannot tell character-driven stories about, like, tic-tac-toe. With chess, sometimes you get like a hero knight or a stupid bishop. But there needs to be something. I think city-building strategy games suffer from this a bit, despite being good for storytelling in other ways. You can pretend to be the mayor, you can pretend to be God, but the game isn't giving you that much. And there's no other specific characters for you to riff off of. On the other hand, if you're playing Civ, you can just cosplay as your leader, interacting with other leaders. Having a well-defined character isn't enough, though. Your character has to do interesting things that humans can relate to. Big and small themes and ideas about life and the universe that resonate with humans make for compelling narratives. Exploration, mystery, progression and change in characters, relationships, conflict, both personal conflict and war, death, desperation, and glory. These are things we can find in the video games that have the best emergent storytelling. Take family. In Civilization, you don't have a family. You are effectively an immortal communist demigod, commanding your people as they progress through human history. Super cool in terms of scope, but it's not relatable. Your position as leader is very detached and sterile. Literally sterile, you don't have any children. In Crusader Kings and Rome Total War, your character fucks. You don't just have a leader, you have a whole dynasty. And sex, romance, and raising a family make for amusing and relatable storytelling beats. Consider this. It is much funnier if, in place of saying, "Oh, this random general I recruited sucks at his job," instead we say, "My nephew is such an incompetent buffoon." It's funnier if instead of saying, "I'm out of admin points," we say, "I'm fucking broke." Admin points are an abstraction. Being broke is something that has immense cultural baggage, in the best way. I like Crusader Kings for this. The resources used seem pretty grounded. And some of the things you can do. There's an incongruity between what it means in the context of the game, and how ridiculous it would sound if you said the same thing in real life. There are so many actions in the game that are so inherently interesting or humorous that our brains cannot help but interpret them literally and start imagining all the implications. Obviously, the salacious options like incest and castration get people's attention, or Civ 2's Eternal Game with its uncanny resemblance to dystopian fiction. But it can even be completely innocent things like, "Oh, my ruler made a friend." I loved how in Grand Theft Auto 4, your cousin would call you up and ask you to go bowling with him. These moments elicit a human reaction from us, and I think that that's valuable. Civilization might not have these same human themes to the same extent, but it shines in other departments. Let's talk about stakes. In Civilization, you are the stand-in for your ruler, and you can roleplay as them, but the units are nameless and faceless. Literally faceless, it's a little disturbing. But exploration has an inherent danger to it. Will my unit even survive? I love the suicide boat from Civilization 3. You can pass through some dangerous waters if you're willing to risk your boat being lost at sea. If it's lucky enough to survive several of these coin flips, and makes it to distant shores, it is no longer just some faceless drone. Not only did it risk a perilous journey, but it can find great rewards in these faraway lands. It's not replaceable. If it dies out here, it's going to be very difficult to get back to where he was. Suddenly, the life of this vessel has meaning. A battle with barbarians has enormous weight to it. If he lives, he's a hero. If he dies, he's a martyr whose death must be avenged. A good story needs to have stakes to it. That means that games need to be designed in a way where not only do you do cool things, but the choices you make also need to have an impact on how things play out. It's fun to be rude to leaders in diplomacy, but where does that take you? Again, you can see this in the Civilization franchise. Civilization 4 was probably the peak of the AI as unique and effective antagonists. Civ 2 and 3 were great, but the programming of the different AI leaders didn't have enough variation. In Civ 4, enemy leaders have individual personalities. Ramses likes to chill out and build wonders. Tokugawa is isolationist and hates the idea of trading with anyone. It's pretty easy to pick up. Civilization 5 and 6 did continue to deliver these unique AI profiles. Just, there was a pushback against open table diplomacy, and so diplomacy had some of its power taken away. This is rough. It was your main vehicle for interacting with the antagonists of your narrative, and the system's still there, but it's a lot easier to ignore. It doesn't have the same stakes that it used to. Another point that I'd like to mention is mechanical complexity. Games have to have enough things going on for us to be able to take the story in more interesting directions. I played a lot of SimCity 2000 when I was growing up, and one thing that I loved to do was build a city and then destroy it with natural disasters. Earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires. Every new mechanical feature that is added to the game increases the number of scenarios that we can play out when we tell stories, although some of them are more effective than others. And for us to get that classic take away the ladder and watch your sim drown, somebody had to program pools into the game, along with drowning itself. I saw a great interview a while back with the creator of Dwarf Fortress. In it, he tells the story of a bug report where cats were dying left, right, and center on the tavern floor. Turns out the dwarves were spilling their booze, and the cats were stepping in it. And then, of course, they're programmed to keep themselves clean, so the cats were licking their paws, and eventually dying of alcohol poisoning. The more that the game is fleshed out, the more that the interactions within will surprise and amuse you. Or maybe horrify you. There's one more ingredient in good emergent storytelling, and I think that this is the one that makes strategy games really shine. And that is agency. Allow me to explain what I mean. I watched a video the other day from a Final Fantasy-focused channel. He was doing a challenge run of Final Fantasy VIII, where he was only allowed to use female characters. And while he was doing it, he was spinning up a really funny story about female empowerment and not needing men for anything, but sadly, the game itself was not doing him any favors in this department. It would often force him to take particular actions that would invalidate what he was trying to do, and he needed to make a lot of changes to the rules of his challenge to be able to actually beat the final boss. Role-playing games could be about being the character that you want to be, but often they are surprisingly rigid. It is precisely because strategy games do not have linear plots that they can be vehicles for such excellent storytelling. Last week I did a playthrough of Alpha Centauri on the hardest difficulty, with the restriction that I wasn't allowed to build any formers. This is the most basic game unit. I mean, it was hard, but the game never forced me to take any particular actions the way that RPGs so often do. Even more sandboxy, open-world games like Grand Theft Auto. In San Andreas, you can't even access most of the map until you beat dozens of specific missions that are completely railroaded. Linear story is the death, in a lot of ways, of emergent narrative. So, characters, themes, stakes, mechanical depth, and agency. These are what drive emergent narrative in computer games. So what's the next step from here? What can developers do better? Well, the first step is to just put all of these things together, and it seems to me that this is what Crusader Kings has done. I'm more familiar with CK2, but I've watched videos about CK3, and the changes that they made seem to be fantastic. One video I love is Jillion's Spreading Christmas Cheer in Crusader Kings. In the video, she creates a character that looks like Santa Claus. Here, you can see cosmetic features enabling a lot of the humor. It's also a great example of mechanical depth, adding to the storytelling, because she uses the altruistic pilgrimage mechanic to go on a journey and give away toys. This is a really cool option that doesn't exist in, say, medieval Total War 2. I dump on the DLC-based monetization model for PC games nowadays a lot, but one thing that it's good at is producing games that have an absurd abundance of content, adding more mechanical options for your storytelling. As I said, cosmetic options like being able to rename your cities or units are obviously great, but you can be surgical with the ways that these are implemented. Here's an example. In Civilization 3, when you win a battle with an elite unit, it has the small chance to spawn a great general. When you do that, you instantly get a pop-up asking you if you would like to rename the unit. It's like a little signpost that says, hey, this guy is important in the story of your game. Don't just give players the option, encourage them at times when it makes the most sense for them to use it. Developers should be thinking about what sort of characters you would see in the game that they're making, and design around that. This could be simple, like adding more lore to the wielders in Songs of Conquest, but it could also be something like Crusader Kings 3, with a completely decked-out character builder. Probably the best yardstick for whether a game has good potential for emergent narrative is whether or not the patch notes are kind of funny. The Sims and Dwarf Fortress are notorious for this, but my personal favorite was a bug in Crusader Kings 2. If the Byzantines got too big, the game would grind to a halt, because every single day, every single Greek-cultured leader would individually decide whether or not to castrate or blind every single other leader in the game. If journalists are writing articles about how funny the bugs are in your game, just like a text-based description of them, no video footage, then you've basically received the Lifetime Achievement Award in good game design. Focusing on two of the elements I mentioned before, which are human themes and mechanical depth, is a surefire way to achieve this. Static characters are good, but I really like games with dynamic characterization. Crusader Kings is loaded with this. You have little narrative pop-ups where you need to make a choice about what your character would do. Another example is Rome Total War, where your actions in the game will change the character's traits. If you chase the enemy down after the battle is won, or exterminate cities, you might get the bloodthirsty trait. When you make roleplay decisions in these two games, the game reinforces the roleplay back to you, and I think that that's lovely. I know a lot of us are tired of the RPGification of every other single genre of video games. From a gameplay perspective, I don't, for example, like the promotion system on units in Civ 4, but it does make individual units stand out. It makes you see them as unique, and it causes you to make decisions that could impact your storytelling. It's not very original nowadays, but it has been a very positive development. And in fact, role-playing games took a lot from D&D, like the skill progressions and the level ups, but there's nothing really improvisational about Final Fantasy IV, for example. Now, some RPGs like Dragon Age do give you more freedom, but there's a lot in D&D that strategy games feel like they are the heir to. I don't think we should shy away from borrowing more directly from that legacy. I'd like to mention one more time top-down, linear narrative games. These are incredible, and they show just how much can be done when developers design games with storytelling in mind. But as strategy game fans, it's easy to look at The Last of Us getting an HBO adaptation with Pedro Pascal, and feel like we're swimming against the tide of pop culture. But I will remind you that many valuable media properties were created through role-playing and collaborative storytelling. Film series like Records of Lodoss War, TV series like The Expanse, and books like Dragonlance all have their roots in RPG campaigns. Emergent narrative is incredible. Imagine what we'd achieve if more games were designed with it in mind. And I did mean it earlier when I said that we have a spiritual need for creativity. There's something deeply personal, intimate, and human about storytelling. Something that can bring us closer to each other, and if we believe Kierkegaard, by extension, that means closer to God. That's why I stream strategy games every Sunday. Praise the Lord. And pass the ammunition. If you would like to see the stupid little stories that I tell about the games that I play, please subscribe to this channel. Take care, everybody.